I think I want to reflect on something for a moment. I want to reflect on something for a moment. You know, I've been at demonstrations for well over 50 years, 55, 56 years. And I think that we have learned some things from the civil rights movement, from the anti-war movement, from the women's movement, from the early environmental movement, the anti-nuke effort. And that answers a question that I think has got to be in everybody's mind. How are we going to win this? To affirm that this group of people feels this strongly is certainly part of that. But you may need to know, you may ask the question, well, how do we, Bethany, would you come up here, please? Yes, and close that door. And then this is not so much for the cameras, it's for those of you who are tried and true and dedicated. You might say, well, what are the models that have taught us how we can achieve victory? And then there are certain things that I've learned. And Sunny, Sunny, so wonderful to be with you. Sunny is a tried and truer, if ever there was one. For one thing, you say, how is it possible for the Hudson River to be cleaned up? You say, what was the miracle that made that happen? And because if you were starting at that place, say this is an insuperable obstacle. The factories and the farms and the garbage and the effluents are just up and down the river. The river can't swim in it, let alone fish in it. How is it possible that that was turned around? And you say, how does that relate to what we're doing here? And how did that relate to what happened in the civil rights movement? The effort that was initiated by Pete Seeger with the Clearwater was very straightforward and went back to what Josh was saying. It's about people being together. They would go up and down the Hudson River and have a singing gathering. This was not a confrontation. This was an affirmation that people's hearts needed to be united with information and goodwill and caring and music that tore down frequently the barriers between people's perspectives. And after the people would hear about this, they'd be informed about the fact that what was going on around them was destroying the river. And instead of saying, well, what can I do? I'm only one person, they would begin to understand that, as with a vote, it is a cumulative reality. It was because of this creation of community, of really unanimity of spirit that transcended race, religion, color lines, all lines, that a larger constituency was developed. Were the opponents strong and continue to be strong? Yes. But gradually, what I call a pool of peace these little pools of peace touched each other because they had ripple effects. In the same sense that we've seen the lesbian and gay or LGBT community all of a sudden burst upon the scene as something in which people of the United States have decided people have a right to love whom they wish and get married to whom they wish. That didn't happen from a top-down decision. It happened because of these people living that reality in these little pools of peace and justice where they shared that. And all of a sudden it began to be the nodding of yes. Yeah, we are in this together. And the way in which that happened was by information, by the creation of empathy, by hearing this heartbreaking, outrageous story and saying, I am you. I walk in your shoes. And saying, these are only two people. And I am only one, or I am only three. But I matter. They matter. The answer to what can I do? I'm only one person is inverted when you say, these are only two people. Can we let this happen to others? Or do our hearts break for what has been done to them? And how do we stand behind them? And that's the same spirit that energizes these cases in point was true in the civil rights movement. When you had those lunchroom counter sitters, they were trained to allow themselves to be beaten and not to retaliate. They learned how to become, in spite of everything, an affirmative model for saying, we will not become the enemy. We will not become our own foe, as the light one candle for the strength that we need to never become our own foe. We will not do that. And that takes immoral courage, and it takes the kind of guts that's really, really extraordinary, but it also takes love. What fueled the civil rights movement, if you were there in '63, and maybe a few of you were, there wasn't any fear. There was only love. It was so powerful that you could feel it in your hearts. And how do you know when you're on the right track? When you're up there in that podium, and you're speaking, and you're saying what you're saying, you can be furious about the act, but love for human beings is in your heart. That's a neat trick if you can do it. But it is essentially what has fueled the movements. And how do you feel that love? What insulates you from the hatred so that you don't become your own foe?
Music.
Not being alone.
Right.
Not being alone. And one of the vehicles for allowing yourself to not be alone is to be sharing music, because music is not informational in terms of the intellect alone. It is informational in terms of the soul and the spirit. And therefore, we think about a song that's very instructive, that Peter, Paul, and Mary sang at the March on Washington in 1963. In it, Pete Seeger and Lee Hayes tell us a lot. And we feel it with the intention when we sing it. They say, there is a danger. There is a danger. And we must hammer out that danger. We must sing out that danger. We must ring out that danger. What is that danger? The danger is that if we do not protect justice, if we do not stand up for each other, justice will evaporate. It has to be done in every generation, in every year. Rights of women over their own bodies is not something that's now over. It will be one in every generation. There are rights and realities that we have buried. And until we look at those violations in some kind of an open way with restorative justice, in reference to particularly our First Nations people, we're like a hit-and-run driver. We went, we did this, and the hell with that. Let's just keep driving. But we can come together on these issues. And there is a coincidence. If we want justice to be preserved, and we focus on this issue now, it emboldens us. It empowers us to know that we can stand up to maybe the most challenging issues that have never been dealt with. But for the moment, let us deal with this one issue. For the moment, let us say that there is a momentum that has been achieved through dear Mr. Cuomo. Pete Seeger saying in that film, your father was perhaps the greatest governor, but if you do not forbid fracking, you will be the worst governor. Try being, you know, the governor living with that admonition on your shoulders.